Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today we are going to be doing a technique I haven't done in a really long time, which is like watercolor bleaching or distress ink bleaching. We are using the Sending Christmas Joy set from Honeybee. I think I only used this set in one video, so I really needed to come back and kind of revisit it. And I know dyes are the thing right now, and I have grown an appreciation for dyes, but there are some techniques that you can only do with stamps, and I still love stamps. I still love them. So anywho, I am working on watercolor paper, and I treated it with an anti-static tool. I'm gonna stamp the already created floral arrangement onto kind of like the bottom right and top left corners. They are going to extend out a little bit, but basically I want to stamp them so that I can have a design in the middle and also a design on the edges without really having to do too much extra work. So I stamped them in our what is it? White pigment ink? Be Creative. That's what I was trying to think of. Be Creative white pigment ink. And then I went ahead and heat embossed them with a white detail embossing powder. And then I'm going to put it back into my MISTI. I'm going to clean it off so when I'm arranging it, I'm not getting that pigment ink anywhere that I don't want it. And then I'm going to lay it back down and figure out a good arrangement for what I have going on here. Like I said, I filled up the bottom left and the top right so that they're kind of catty corner from each other, but I tried to keep them pretty close in the center so that I would still have a design there. I cannot even remember the last time that I did this technique, but I was playing around it live with some distress ink, watercoloring and stuff, and I was like, man, I really have not revisited that technique in quite some time. And sometimes it's kind of fun to venture out and do some Christmas cards that are a little less traditional. And so I thought that these would kind of be like a bright, fun Christmas card that was maybe a little bit unexpected. So I chose to do red, yellow, and teal. Like a blue-green versus blue, but they're like primary colors, so they're going to work really nicely together. I picked the yellow, the mustard seed is really strong. So I picked two of the reds, which is abandoned coral and candied apple. And then I picked two of the teals, peacock feathers and uncharted mariner, just so that way I knew when I was bringing them together, those lighter colors would maybe blend a little nicer. But you do want to have pretty good saturation of color for this technique to have that wow factor. Here you will see that I was in the middle. I was working on a card while my husband was taking Jelly Bean to swim. And so then she got home and she wanted to help. So there she is. And then she wanted to, color some other things on my desk with my markers, and that when I was like, no, mommy's doing this, we have to do the ink, she became very disenchanted very quickly. And so then she went to go color and I continued on solo with my card making. So you may notice when I'm putting on the peacock feathers that it's not as vibrant as it normally is, and that is a direct result of me not cleaning my glass mat. Had I cleaned off the red from my glass mat, the peacock feathers would have been much more vibrant. And then I went in, like I said, with that uncharted mariner, just so I had some pockets of richer color. Same thing with that candied apple. I'm going over pretty much the same spot, but that's just to get that richer color because I want that pop when I do the technique. So again, choosing these colors, I knew that they would work pretty nicely together. Instead of using a green, using a blue-green is going to work well with the red and with the yellow. And obviously red and yellow work nicely together as well. So this whole background kind of is like meh until I think you bring the yellow in and it adds like that really bright, vibrant pop of color. And then I was much, much happier with the way that it was looking. My my husband was standing at the door while Jelly Bean was sitting on my lap, and he was like, "Is this a tropical Christmas card? Like, why does it look that way?" And I was like, "It's a bright, fun Christmas kind of card." We're going to pair it with like a fun kind of sentiment. So typically whatever color you put on top is the one that you're going to see the majority of. So I did go back in with that abandoned coral and just, really kind of like add that red in. You want to go in and like clean off the white heat embossing like you would if you were doing an emboss resist. My rag was a little bit too wet, I will be honest. So you can almost kind of see the streak it left in the background. Ultimately, for what we're doing to make these two cards, it's not really going to matter, but just something to keep in mind. This is not something that you have to do for the technique to work. This is just something that I do because I like to add dimension to a lot of things. So here I have picked the cool grays, and I'm going to be honest with you, the warm grays probably would have been more beneficial in this one, but I just default to the cool grays. And right next to the heat embossing, I like to add my shadows down and to the left. And this is what we call a cast shadow. So I'm working as if my light source is in the top right-hand corner, adding the shadows down to the bottom left. And this is just going to help lift this up. So I'm starting right up against it with my darkest color, which is a C5. And then from there, I'm going to blend out that C5 with a C3 and then a C1. Like I said, because I have warmer colors, the reds and the yellows, it probably would have been more beneficial for me to use a warm gray. You can see how nice the cool blends out when it comes to that blue-green though. Ultimately, I'm not super sad about it. I just think it makes it look a little bit more gray than it needs to. But you can see here how much lift that is giving us off of our stamped images. Now, here's the technique. So you're going to need some clean water, a detailed paintbrush, and a paper towel. You're going to go in, you're going to add clean water. The reason that this works so well with the embossing is because it creates little wells for the water to stay in. And then, so you're going to add your water, you're going to let it sit for a second, and then you're going to blot it up with a clean portion of the paper towel. You don't want to keep using the same dirty portion or you risk redepositing it. And then you can see it bleaches out that color and leaves kind of like a pastel of that color behind. So where we have the red in the background, it's leaving more of like a corally color. What is that called? More of a, what is it? Saltwater taffy. Like that's what it kind of looks like when it bleaches out. But this is now, we're speeding this up so you can see the whole thing. You don't have to be worried about like mixing the colors. You can do the whole flower or the whole area that you want. And lift it up all at one time. You don't have to worry about that. So you can see how it's like bleaching that out. And then we're going to go back in to add some more definition. Transversely, you could do the opposite of this. So you could do like a lot of really heavy inking and then bleach out your background. And that would be a totally different look. But because it's the distress inks and they have those properties of, staying wet a little bit longer and working well with water, you can lift them pretty cleanly. And so this is a great way to move those pigments around. There's a couple of other techniques that you can see utilized here that you can stop like midway. But for this one in particular, in order for it to have that bleached out look, you do want to fill in that whole area and then pick it up. That lightness is again working with the shadow that we put down to really lift those images up and give us a ton of dimension on what is a completely flat cardstock panel. Also, just to remember, I am working on watercolor paper, and that is super important because regular cardstock cannot take this type of water. It won't work the same way. It'll absorb it instead of resist the water. So you don't want to be doing that on regular cardstock. But it is super fast, and you can decide how much you want to lift. Like you can see some of them, I went back in and added more water to like a second time to get more lift. But if you want them to have a little bit more pigment, then you can decide how much or how little you want to lift up based on where you put the water. There's a lot of different ways that you can play around with this, but the easy, which is what I'm doing, the easy way is to just fill in the whole thing and then blot it all up together. So now there's nothing wrong with this background, and you could absolutely turn this into a card, but because I do like to add that dimension, I am going to go in and do a little bit more with it. So here I am using those same gray markers, and I am, because we have all these colors that are intermixed, right? We did a lot of ink blending. I'm going to use these same gray colors to add dimension to my flowers. Just the same way that I would if I was coloring the flower white. So I'm using the grays to add the shadows, and that's pretty much all I'm using it for. So the darkest color will go into the darkest little crevices. We're going to have shadows any point where two items meet or where one object lays on top of the other. And then once I have that, and you can see I'm not adding a lot of C5, very little C5, going over that with the C3 and then again with the C1. Something to note, you can color your embossing, like the heat embossing that you have down there, you can color it. So you don't want to like scrub over top of it to damage the embossing or damage your nibs at all. If you are using, like, say you're using a darker color and you go over top of it, you can go in with a colorless blender and just swipe over top of it, wipe that on a scrap piece of paper, and then swipe over it again, but you don't want to scrub. So I chose to use the cool grays because I have all this ink blending, but you're going to see at the end I do bring in some other colors. Again, this is another opportunity to mix this up because you could go in there and fully color it with alcohol markers. You could go in there, like skip the bleaching technique and just color it with alcohol markers and get a totally different look. So there's lots of things that you can do here depending upon the look that you're going for. I wanted kind of bright and fun Christmas cards, and I think that I was able to achieve that with what we had going on with this background, but maybe you're looking for a different look. I also really like this for sympathy cards because it can be a softer technique that you can do to, add some dimension in there with all the, the coloring and the shadows. But you can do them like a soft teal color or a soft blue and, make them more monochromatic and create a really pretty sympathy card. So there's just different ways that you can kind of utilize this. Again, I am coloring these as the same way that I would be doing if I was coloring them white. So just adding in the shadows and letting those colors kind of breathe for themselves. I am not going to show you because they're the same floral image, like everything that we've just colored here would be all the things that we would color at the bottom. So I'm not going to show you the coloring of the entire card because you've seen everything. You've already seen everything colored up here in the top bit. But I do think it's really interesting to see the before and after of adding the shading and how much dimension it adds to the stamped images, but also I think it's really soft and pretty before you even add any of the dimension. Like you could absolutely get away with the one in the bottom and not add any of the shading at all and still have a really pretty card. So here, now they're both shaded here. And then this is where I'm going to bring in those other colors. Again, this is like an extra. I wanted those colors, I wanted the flowers to appear a little bit less gray. I felt like the cool gray was probably a misstep on my part in selecting that. And I try to keep it real and be very upfront with you guys. But I also believe everything is fixable. So in order to kind of push back that gray, I brought in some really light versions of the colors that I was already using. So I brought in a YO2, a BG11, and I think it's an R11. And I'm just going to go over top of that gray blending that I already have down. And I'm also going to have them kind of like mix together with each other, choosing the colors that I chose, the R11, BG11, and YO2. Honestly, the YO2 was probably a little bit strong. But those colors are all ending in 1s or 2s, which means that they'll blend really nicely together. And so that is what I did here, just to give them a little bit of brightness and help them from looking like they were so gray, which is kind of what we had going on before. Now at this point, I am super happy with the way that this is looking. You could turn this card into so many things. Thank you card, but I really wanted that kind of bright, fun Christmas card. I'm going to do some splatters in the background to bleach out some of the area in between and help tie the two pieces together so they don't feel so segregated. And you can do that and stop there. I love the shimmers. That's no secret if you watch my channel. So I am going to go in and do the same thing with some perfect pearls so that we have some splatters in the background, but also some shine. Again, a different technique that you could do would be to use the perfect pearls and kind of paint in that embossed area, and then you would have that watercolory look with the shimmers, which would be really pretty. I know dyes are really popular and I love them and the look that you can get from them, especially now that I've gotten more comfortable coloring them. But I feel like on the technique side of things, like, I sometimes forget how many different techniques you can do with stamps and how much I really enjoy those techniques. So this particular stamp set is a like postage stamp style set with these hellebores. And I didn't want to use the stamp because I didn't want anything that was going to be like that heavy and black, since we do have the white embossed stamping. So I'm cutting the frame for the postage part, but I'm just not going to stamp it. So I'm cutting that out of white. I'm also cutting the middle out of my heat embossing so that I can fit that into the white kind of postage frame. And then I'll use the frame for the other one to create my second card. In order to create the frame, I have to go back in with that rectangle and cut that out as well. For the sentiment, I chose the Merry and Bright because it's like a fun sentiment. It's a large sentiment that can, compete with all of the things that we have going on in the background. And so I cut the shadow out of Vellum. And then I'm going to cut the Merry and Bright out of this red. This is Poppy from Spellbinders. And I'm going to cut it out of red, white, and this teal. What is this? Teal topaz, I think is what it is. And then I also used the Art Deco nesting dies to cut out this kind of shape that will help me with my second card, just so that they aren't squares on squares. Just something a little different, that's all. And because I'm cheap, I am going to use the cardstock that I cut my Art Deco frame out of. I'm going to use that as the red background for my postage frame because I am who I am. I do want to mention, I know that some people don't watch the lives, so you might not be aware. We had talked about it quite a bit in the lives, doing a tag class for Honeybee. And we are going to be doing that. We are going to be doing that next weekend. on Sunday because people had stuff going on Saturday. So we're going to be doing the holiday tag class on Sunday, December 14th at 2:30. And obviously it'll be up after that. It's a free class that we're going to be doing over on the Honeybee channel if you're interested in that. And they always make it like super fun, and it's a good time for like everybody to like chit chat. And I don't necessarily make tags all the time, but I do think that it will be fun to kind of use our card making or my card making things to put them together for some Christmas tags. So for the red sentiment, I stacked them up on 2 layers of white, and then I adhered that to the vellum. Because you can see adhesive through vellum, I just added adhesive back behind the actual letters. The vellum helps the sentiment to kind of pop forward because it is on that busier background. For the second card, I'm using the frame that was left behind, and then I'm going to fill in the white, the middle, from the one that we cut out there on the left-hand side so that it's level. And then I'm going to use the Art Deco to house my sentiment. For this one, I adhered them together offset. The other one, like we stacked up multiples. This one I'm going to do offset so that it's a white sentiment, but it has that teal color shadow. And that's helping it kind of pop off there as well. Glued that down, and then I'm going to pop up the actual frame onto the card so it has a little bit of lift. The other one has the lift from the stacked sentiment. This one has the lift on the whole piece. It did feel like it needed a little something, so I added some shimmer to both sentiments on both of the cards, knowing that I was going to trap it on this one. And then for this one over here, it just, even after I added my pearls and everything, it just seemed like it needed something. So I'm going to put my die back in place, and I'm going to hold it there with my hand. I would highly recommend you do this before building the entire card. And then I am going to use my white gel pen to trace the inside edge. And that is going to give me a white frame, and it's going to help kind of frame that whole sentiment in and give it a more finished look. So then once I checked it, I was happy with that. Then I finished out the bottom. For this one, because that frame, we didn't actually stamp it, I'm just going to use a T-square ruler and draw in a frame. Again, I'm skipping the areas where the B and the T are hanging out. In order to help that sentiment stand out a little more against that busier background, I'm going in with glossy accents, and this is going to trap that shimmer that we added, and it's also going to add a nice glossy look to the sentiment. So again, it's going to help it stand out. I think these are super fun. I was thrilled with the way that they came out. I thought that they were, kind of just bright and something different. I'd love to hear your guys' take on how you think that they came out. Thank you so much for joining me. I always appreciate your time, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.